Colleagues, good afternoon. Many thanks for joining on time to our monthly event. I'm Gleb Vishlinsky, the Executive Director of the Center of Economic Strategies, with the topic, what keeps the business from engaging money. This is this joint project of the Joint Economic Team and Center of Economic Strategy joint project. As usual, you can leave your questions in chat, Q&A. You can also put that into chat. It's less comfortable. So in the first part of our event, as usual, the experts from the economic strategy will look at main changes in the economy over the last months. Our project, which we started since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, and we're looking every month at what is happening with the economy. Then we are discussing the topic, which is a key, most actual for the period in question. So today, together with the representatives of the government, the National Bank and business, we will discuss the topic, special topic, what keeps the business from engaging money. And now I would like to ask for a short introduction, Gary Polushkin, who is representing German economic team, and he's the project manager of the German economic team. Many thanks. Good afternoon from Berlin. My name is Gary Polushkin, and it's my pleasure to announce today's webinar. I'm the coordinator for Ukraine of the German economic team, and this project is financed by the Federal Ministry of Economy and Climate Protection, and is consulting the government of Ukraine in the issues of economic policy. With the beginning of the full-scale invasion, together with CES, we are organizing monthly webinars that give the important possibility to discuss the condition of the economy, which is a regular part of this event and the actual topic. Today, our topic is the financing of companies. In the conditions of the full-scale invasion, it's been very important to have the finances for the business. This topic was also raised at the conference from the Ukraine Recovery Conference, which instruments are available and what are the possible risks. This is the important question of today's discussion. Many thanks. Gary, many thanks to you. And now we will move to our monthly presentation and the review of tendencies that we have in the Ukrainian economy over the last months. And let us start, as usual, the economist, Maxim. Please, the floor is yours. Thank you, Gleb. Allow me to share my screen. And traditionally, let me start our event from the review of the economy, namely from economic trends, what was happening in the Ukrainian economy over the last month. Based on the data from the State Statistics Service, GDP grew by 6.5% in the first quarter of 2024 compared to the first quarter of 2023. But the further economic recovery will slow down. According to the forecast of the Ministry of Economy, GDP will grow by 3.5% year to year. The NBU forecasts growth in the amount of 3%. These forecasts are in line with the IMF's baseline scenario. However, under the negative scenario, the IMF predicts a 1.7% contraction of the Ukrainian economy in 2024. We hope that this scenario will not materialize and that the energy crisis will not have that much of a negative impact on the economy. In June, also, the index of expectations of business activity also dropped. It fell to 43.6 points from 48 in May and remained below the neutral level of 50 points. Negative expectations were prevailing among all surveyed economies. The mood has deteriorated due to the first place because of the worsening of the security situation, significant energy crisis as the result of the Russian shelling and more business costs. Let's go to the sectoral analysis. Just a few words about the energy sector. That's a very important topic these days. The hot weather in July has traditionally increased the electricity consumption, and now this is also overlapping with the problem of deficit in production of electric energy. And in June, Ukraine imported 856 gigawatt hours of electricity, which is almost twice as much as in May, but May was already twice than the previous records of the wartime. Ukraine would not export the last commercial exports took place on the 13th of May, but even then, the last day when the net exports were recorded was April 11th. So unfortunately, the situation with energy remains complicated, and we all feel that, because in such places like Kiev, Dnipro, the planned outages of electric energy exceed 40% of the day. At the same time, the steel production remains at a high level. It did decrease versus previous months by 0.4% and amounted to 735 tons. With this, pig iron and rolled steel production decreased by 4% to 629 tons and 572,000 tons respectively. If we look at the half a year, based on the results of the first half a year, steel production increased by 37%, pig iron by 22%, rolled products by 32% versus previous year. In May, we also exported 3.3 million tons of iron ore. This is slightly less than in May, but twice as much as June last year. The main importers of our iron ore were China, Slovakia, and Poland. Ukraine could renew its exports to China thanks to the sea corridor. Domestic consumption of steel products decreased by 4% to 1.3 metric tons. So we can produce and we can export iron ore and the metallurgical products, because the domestic consumption over 5 months decreased, as I said, by 4% to 1.36 million tons. Exports of agriculture decreased versus previous months. We understand the seasonality is already impacting. We could take out those harvests that we were storing, and in case in the previous months we were beating record after record, renewing records of the wartime, especially by volume of export of grains by sea. So now we expect that the export will decrease, but there is nothing difficult in that. On the 1st of July, this is also the start of a new marketed year for oilseeds and grains. We can already summarize 2023-2024 marketing year. From grains, oilseeds, and vegetable oils, we export almost around 70 million tons. Exports of wheat grew by 9%. Corn exports amounted more or less the same. Barley slightly decreased by 8.5%. Soya beans and rapeseed decreased by 8.2%, while rapeseed grew by 8.7%. We also have a significant drop of the sunflower exports. In the previous marketing year, we exported only 324,000 tons of soya. That's minus 86.3. So we are coming back to the situation when the exported products are processed in Ukraine and the processed goods are already exported. And some words about the exports of IT services. In the end of last year, every month it was shortening, and now we can see that the market has found a certain balance with the level slightly more than $560 million for monthly exports, and in May, IT services export was $560 million. But even with this optimistic scenario, the export would shrink in 2024 compared to previous year by 3.5% to $6.5 more or less billion. That's according to the forecast of the Lviv IT cluster. This is all from my side. Thank you. And passing on to the next speaker. Thank you, Maxim. We have pictures not just like that. I looked at the beautiful first pictures of the first slide, thanks to the communication teams who are emphasizing this is part of the time without electricity, especially in Kiev, which we had on photographs. Thanks God that the light day is more than what it used to be. From this, I'm talking now to Maria Tamilina, taking the floor, that she will tell us about the monetary, foreign exchange, and banking sectors. Maria, please, the floor is yours. Good afternoon. You can hear me and you can see me. So let us start, as usually, from the assessment of the key rates. In the beginning of June, the National Bank decreased the key rate to 13%. This was as a result of the inflation. It's been quite favorable. There were improved expectations, and there was progress in securing international financing. This all brought to easing monetary policy. Now, opinions from the National Bank are slightly different on what we should do with the key policy rate further. Shall we keep it or we decrease it? The next meetings will show. And if we talk about the yield of 1-year hryvnia war bonds and the 3 and 12 months deposit rates, they continued to decrease in response to the reduction in the key policy rate over the last several months. And in June, inflation saw some acceleration to 4.8% year to year due to gradual waning of effects from last year's harvests, as well as pass-through effects from hryvnia depreciation and increase in electricity prices for the population. In case we talk about the international reserves, they once again declined to $37.9 billion. This was because of the interventions of National Bank to address foreign currency deficit, stabilize the exchange rate fluctuations, and as well as make FX debt payments international currency. These tendencies were partially compensated by international financial aid and from placement of new government bonds. If we talk about the exchange rate, in June, the hryvnia fluctuated in both sides, but still we are seeing depreciation, and we fixed the new anti-record, the historical minimum, where the cost of the hryvnia was 4.5 hryvnia per $1. The main reasons that increased demand, this was the high intensity of the government expenditures. That's also intensified fuel purchases before there will be the potential increase of the excise tax, as well as imports of electric energy due to the loss of generating capacities. And this is also affects liberalization transactions. If we talk about what is happening in the banking sector, in May, hryvnia and foreign currency deposits continued their growth, reaching or even surpassing levels seen at the end of 2023. Rising incomes drive increased bank deposits, with over a third in hryvnia terms, ensuring stable balances amid growing deposit competition. If we talk about lending, corporate and retail continues to recover slightly among all currencies, but there are certain peculiarities in terms of in which industries we have the demand for financing. These are the industries which are quite quickly growing. Are they financing their needs themselves, especially when we talk about the turnover capital? So in general, these companies who, for instance, require recovery, they can get some subsidized loans. So bank loans are given to the operationally profitable companies, while others are using alternative financing. If we talk about more detail, what is also happening in the lending sector, what we do see some certain macro stability and controlled security risks. They really are improving lending. Therefore, banks are increasing their risk appetites and they continue to give more loans. Still, the risks remain quite significant. We're talking about the problem with power outages, some uncertainty about the length of the war, and the shortage of skilled workers. At the same time, irrespective of all of that, the banks of all groups are increasing hryvnia loans at moderate rates, and that certifies to some systematic improvements in lending. In general, the new factor of this improvements is exactly the new lenders, the new borrowers, and most active are the state-owned banks. Their clients are mostly not so big companies, and 75% are the ones who are coming for subsidized loans within 579. If we talk about 579 affordable loans program, it has been very important in the beginning of the full-scale invasion. And as a result, we had permanent changes, and some companies could get the funds within this program. And the budget of Ukraine was not meant for such a loan program. So there was some debts in terms of compensations to the bank. And already in June, this debt is some 6 billion hryvnia. Correspondingly, there were certain changes in terms of who can get these services, but still there are certain National Bank is setting up certain criteria that have to be taken into account to make sure that this program would continue. Also, I would like to discuss about NPL. In general, we see a systematic improvement of this indicator. It is decreasing. Why it's decreasing? This is connected with the fact that we are growing lending, and correspondingly, there is an increase in the what we call the healthy portfolio. At the same time, we have also found out that the non-performing loans portfolio increased a little bit. A special attention is that this was the increase in non-performing loans to individuals, and this has been the first rise since the beginning of 2023. In general, most corporate NPLs, excluding loans to former private bank owners, result in minimal payments, mainly interest, with over two-thirds of the principal debt remaining unpaid. Correspondingly, it's understandable, the longer the loan will be within NPL, the less is the expectation to have it renewed. And in the end, I also wanted to talk about the lending development strategy to increase lending. Last event, I was explaining to you that it was approved. Now we have already a document which can be familiarized. Briefly speaking, the main objective of this strategy is the provision of funds for recovery of the energy infrastructure and activization of those positive trends in lending, which we are seeing. Correspondingly, for this, we need certain steps that each out of the stakeholders can do. Among them is the National Bank, the Ministry of Finances, and the Ministry of Economy. And in the end, I wanted to tell you that these strategies are mentioned in terms of the goals. Among them is the crediting for the defense, ensuring the availability of loans for population and businesses, lowering credit risk, enhancing the quantity of loan portfolio, actually the quality of the loan portfolio, environmental responsibility, developing infrastructure for SMEs, and financial responsibility. The strategy also has two focuses. The first focus is directed at some events, the activization of the loan support of the banking sector in renewing priority industries in the conditions of wartime. These are international grants and investment. This is defense industry and energy sector, insuring risks, and as well as development of mortgage lending and developing of factoring. Thank you, Masha. Thank you for your good preparation to the topic that we will be talking in more detail. Volodymyr will be talking, but we still have one more standard topic, which has already been launched by Yuri Gaidai, our senior economist. This situation is very interesting. Colleagues, good afternoon. A short overview was the budget. More details we will see once we have more details later. First of all, about revenues. Over the first half a year, we have the revenues in nominal values, which are 50% more versus first half a year of 2023. And the largest growth driver was the CIT of banks. It brought almost 80 billion hryvnia compared to the first half a year of previous year. We also have, again, compared to previous year, a significant growth of VAT, both domestic and external, and we have shown that the overall revenues from VAT, domestic, they grew by 26%. With this, the VAT refunds declined by 2.5%. This can't be explained just by the dynamics of exports. It mostly says that there's the improvement in administering VAT or about a more harsh approach to it. It's as you wish to call it. We've also seen the excise revenues. They grew by 81% comparing to first half a year of the previous year. And the only source of tax revenue, which was actually decreased, this was the subsoil rent, minus 21% versus previous half a year. And the key factors of such revenues, apart from increasing CIT for banks, this was also cancellation of temporary tax benefits in 2023, also increased excise tax rates, transfer of the military PIT to state budget. I think still better administration and inflation and depreciation also have contributed. It's also important that in the first half a year of this year, the state has already collected more than 64 billion hryvnia of dividends and net profits from the state-owned enterprises. I'm mentioning this in the tax revenue part because the administration is done by the state tax service. If we talk about expenses, we don't have any special news regarding the data that we have available for May. Once again, we are seeing the cycle of growth of expenditures. First of all, in terms of defense, within 5 months, the defense made 51% of all spending. If we also add costs on law enforcement and justice, this will be like 83% of the whole budget. If we ease down the fluctuations that we had in the beginning of this year, we will see that the expenditures of the state budget remain quite sustainable, and that also is one of the limiting factors that significantly influences the way that the war is going. Regarding local budgets, this year they're slightly slower in terms of accumulating surplus. Of course, military safety was taken away from them, but as of May, the overall deficit of all local budgets was more than 50 billion hryvnia in any case, and based on our evaluation, the overall balances on treasury accounts already exceed 160 billion hryvnia, actually constituted, amounted 1 month ago. Also quite a characteristic growth of the share of transfers from the state budget in the revenues of local budgets. This share is already 28%. If we talk further about the external aid, the picture is slightly better than in the previous months. Let me pay attention that this graph doesn't include the revenues from IMF. Within IFF, I think this was $2.2 billion that already arrived in July. But even taking into account these revenues, we would have the only $16 billion over the first half a year. That's much less than 23.7 billion that we had in the previous half a year, and even engagement of money through bonds, it also decreased via previous year. And we are also seeing the main factor of this external aid is the absence of money from the US and slightly less revenues from the European Union. It's very good that Japan propped us up, and in June the external aid could cover some 37%, slightly more than a third of the state budget financing needs. At this is all. Let us pass the floor to colleagues for our special topic. Thank you, Yuri, and in my turn, I will pass on moderation to Volodymyr Landa, who is our senior economist and who actually was responsible for that research, where we had wanted to go over, which we are publishing today, but this will be a short presentation because mainly we will be talking today with our participants. Volodymyr, the floor is yours. Thank you, Gleb. Thank you, colleagues. Before we move to the discussion, just very briefly, let's go over main items of our review: access of business to financing. So, I would like to say that this project is taking place within the survey of access to finance for Ukrainian SMEs and is implemented with the support of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Netherlands within the framework of the Netherlands Foreign Development Policy, funded by the Private Sector Development Program of the Netherlands Enterprise Agency. And very shortly about main results of this research. Let us start. What are the needs of the business needs of Ukraine in recovery? This is the RDNA 3. This is a common assessment of Ukraine that assesses the direct damage in the amount of $152 billion. Economic, social, and other monetary losses is $499 billion, and recovery and reconstruction needs are evaluated at $486 billion. Although that in the closest year, within the ongoing aggression from Russian Federation, it is foreseen to allocate just 5% of this amount, but even this amount exceeds the current needs. So what are the available sources for the Ukrainian business? Of course, these are affordable 579 loans, We talked about them, and we will talk in more detail about that. Some other non-bank loans in national currency, also foreign currency bonds. These are non-bank loans given by leasing companies, credit unions, or financial companies. These are various state and regional support programs. That are the programs that are implemented with the help of international donors, both of separate countries and some IFIs, and the projects that are implemented by various companies and organizations. And in the majority of cases, it doesn't matter which is the source of the financing, be it grant or loan, the requirements for recipients are quite similar. That's, of course, transparency and integrity of the business, and the business plan which is realistic, achievable, and foresees the return of the loan. It's, of course, operation in certain industries or regions. That's the availability of the appropriate collateral, compliance with the special requirements, and that's the ability or absence of the proper experience in credit or grant funding, and of course no ties with the aggressor country. If we were to evaluate the overall volume of funds that were engaged by business in the yearly value, it's, I think, 340 billion hryvnia, and the leaders are 579 programs and other loans in national currency that account for 40% of the bank financing. This share in foreign currency is decreasing. Also, we have evaluated the overall annual assistance, international support assistance is at the level of 44 billion hryvnia. Of course, a lot of programs are opened and closed, the conditions are changed, and we have some other figures that influences figures. We see the market of the financial leasing, which is like some 27 billion hryvnia. Also, some 16 billion hryvnia, it's the state and regional programs, mostly Robota and Credit Export Agency, as well as financing from financial companies, other companies and organizations. If we talk about the research, this research has come up with a number of key recommendations. You can look them up at the CES website. They can really improve access of business to financing, all the participants of this market, of this business process. So this could be from the side of the state authorities that can take on part of the continuing insurance of the war risks, removing barriers to the acceptance of different asset classes as collateral, implementation of the lending development strategy that we talked about, also gradual liberalization of the leasing, mortgage, and other financial services markets. Apart from that, part of the recommendations can also be to borrowers. The main recommendations is be bankable, keep the principles of business integrity and transparencies. As our interview has shown, within this survey, not all borrowers understand what is meant to be bankable, and this understanding is very much different by the banks and by the borrowers, and that should also really be improved. Diversification of sources of financing and increasing the organizational capacity of business to raise debt capital and using the opportunities of business associations. Also, we believe it's very useful to create a map of opportunities for Ukrainian businesses. We have certain maps that already are there. DIA business, marketplace of the business financial capacities and possibilities. We also have grant market, agri-analytics for agricultural market, a specialized platform. Most importantly, that these databases would be reachable and updatable. Also, we can mention the possibility of non-banking institutions to get financing. That's very short the recommendations that we could make from our research that has some 50 pages, and you can really download it at the Center of Economic Strategy. And I suggest that we move to the discussion of how, in reality, we can raise investment. And I would like to start with the National Bank of Ukraine. Together with us is Kateryna Rozhkova, first deputy head of the National Bank of Ukraine. And the first question I wanted to ask, mostly philosophical, in terms of increasing lending of business, is this a self-objective, or is this the instrument of getting some other economical objectives? In case this instrument, what kind of objectives we would want to reach? Good afternoon, colleagues. Many thanks, colleagues. Many thanks for this research. It's been very interesting. When it comes to your question, definitely, apologies, lending as such is, of course, is not a self-objective, because lending, this is one of the key mechanisms to support the development of the growth of economy. Therefore, when we are talking about the fact that we want the banks to be more actively doing lending and growing the loan portfolios, we mean that we want that these loans would feed the growth of the economy. And that means that lending by itself is actually secondary from the demand of the economic agents. Therefore, once again, you have said about our strategy, we will talk about it more, but when we wrote this strategy and we really divided it into two parts, today, and basically your research, at least the first stage, there is no point to grow. There are no significant obstacles to grow this. The liquidity of the banking system is more than enough. The price of this liquidity is more than moderate. Today in the system, if we talk about the national, it's like 10% in national currency. The capital adequacy of the banking system is more than available. It does really allows to double the credit portfolio. If we talk about some structural obstacles, they're not there. If we talk about the operational possibility, it's also significantly increased. And even in the beginning of the war, if you remember how it was all very difficult, the banking system supported agriculture, they analyzed borrowers and the rest. So I don't see any, as I said, structural obstacles. But okay, what we have seen and what we're talking about, the fall of the economy in 2022 by some 30%, by third, more or less, led to the internal demand significantly fell. The external demand, because of the difficult logistics, also narrowed down. And the volumes of production correspondingly reacted to this. It's clear that there are many things. There are distractions. There is also loss of production capacity. There are many other things that we're talking about. But this in total says that the volume of production decreased. And so far, it's not felt that it will significantly grow when the company needs money as a loan, because they are growing the production or making modernization, expanding lines, investing. The investment demand is not here, and you are also writing about that in your research. There are big risks of uncertainty. The volumes of growth of production are not growing, and the companies, if we look at the banking balances, they basically sit on their monies. Of course, foreign currency limitations contribute to that, because the companies can't pay dividends, can't take money abroad, they can't fully settle in terms of their external obligations when they get loans from non-residents, although they can be even intragroup. That all contributes to the fact that own funds of companies, they sit on their accounts. So without growing the production and with the availability of resources, the demand for loans is deteriorated. And our job is not just to distribute loans to those companies who even don't want, even those who don't need it. Let them take from one bank with the low rate, they could put it as a deposit, and we will see the growth of the portfolio everywhere, and we will report about the record values of the banking system. No, of course, the job is that these funds would be directed at the development of the economy. This is exactly our job. And our colleagues from Ministry of Finances, Ministry of Economy agreed with us. That's why in our strategy, because we can't today, let's put it this way, substitute in full value the internal demand in terms of the consumer demand, which has significantly decreased and would feed the economic growth, we decided that this demand should be substituted at least partially by the state. And because of that, the state should formulate what they would need in the medium and long-term perspective. We have defined these industries and these needs in our strategy, and in the framework of the implementation, we are trying to crystallize in more clearly in order to direct to the banking system. That's very brief. Thank you so much, Ms. Kateryna. Yes, we already are having some questions. I'm sure we will come back to them closer to the end of our conversation. We will be trying to cope to reply to the majority of questions. I would also like to invite to the microphone the representatives of the Ministry of Economy, Andriy Strashnyi, the head of the Department of the Financial Policy of the Ministry of Economy of Ukraine. So we have said many times about 579 program that takes some 40% of lending in the national currency. And we have said that this program is changing in time. And what is the focus of this program now? In general, I wanted to ask from you, and also we will talk with the Entrepreneurship Development Fund to understand how this program is working on the ground. Thank you, Volodymyr. Many thanks. Good afternoon, colleagues. I wanted to say that that 579 program, as we basically imagine it, it's not only about loans. In the state support, in this part, there are loans. That's exactly what we call 579. We have the support of leasing and the support of factoring. So the mechanisms in these three directions is the same. It's by essence, it's subsidizing loans. The state compensates interest rates, the difference in interest rates between the market and those levels that are defined by this resolution to make sure that the subjects of business activity would get access to the resources more cheap than the market level, and they could spend it on their own needs and continue developing. The last focus, 579 focus about transformations, you can talk really a lot, because this year the Minister of Economy became the main provider of this program. It is fixed by the budget, and since the beginning of the year, we are running it. Over the last time, we have introduced quite a lot of changes to this program, and we continue to do that. This is called also, with the effect, the change of the situation that we have around and the change of the priorities. Namely, the last changes that we did, they pertained to the energy. Apart from that, before that, we were making changes that would require the lowering of the budget of the program. We have decreased the margin of the banks. We decreased the base rates in order to decrease the debt, because it's 18 billion hryvnia, and in the beginning of the year there was already a debt, and it's not yet repaid. So we are finding a certain balance in order to finance the priority sectors that we have defined. And as Kateryna Rozhkova has mentioned, in the strategy of the development of lending, we have written that down. The 579 affordable loans, the priority is processing, agriculture, recovery of the damaged business, and a separate direction that we have been looking at recently and we're developing and adding. This was energy. Over the last, sometimes there were certain changes. Some of them were aimed at to add into the program the possibility of the subjects of activity to get equipment for generation, equipment for generations, biogas, gas turbine, gas piston units, and the last changes that took place the last week, we have added into the program these cooperatives, housing cooperatives. In essence, they are not the subjects of entrepreneurship, and of course, this is not the focus of this program, but taking into account the situation with the energy sector, temporarily, we have given access to this program to residential cooperatives. These are not big amounts, just to purchase solar panels, to purchase equipment that will store the generated energy and transport it or transform it in inverters. So based on our calculations, this will not give a significant load on this program. Once again, let me repeat that it will be financed at the expense of the budget of 579 just for 1 year. And then the financing will come to the fund of the energy efficiency, because we in the program have some joint programs for energy. These are the grants that are given by the fund, and therefore usually we are trying to stick to the rules that the state should help. But in this case, the decision was made to make it more affordable, the purchase of the most necessary equipment for generation, so we have put that together. Thank you. In case you have any questions, thank you, Andriy. Maybe you or your colleagues can tell us more about the possibilities which are available to the processing companies. Yes, for companies of the processing industry, we have really put into a separate priority the companies of the processing industry. For them, we have increased the maximum amount of loan, that's 150 million hryvnia, and we have lowered rates for them for the investment direction, because we are keeping the tendency that to decrease lending of the turnover funds, because we don't think it's effective enough. And correspondingly, regarding this direction, not to create any attractive interest rates, to make sure that this direction would be financed with bigger priority. So processing, depending on the category of the subject, micro, small, and big, that gets some differentiated rates within the program. And basically, this is just one of the priorities. Apart from that, the processing companies can also count on the state portfolio guarantees, which are provided within separate programs, and in pair this attractive instrument. Thank you, Mr. Andriy. If Daria Koncharenko could add something from the point of view about the processing companies, then the floor is yours in the Ministry of Economy. Yes, colleagues, good afternoon to everyone. I am the department head of the Department of the Real Economy. Our department today is guiding the program of providing grants for the productions of the processing industry. We have actually renamed it recently. This program, in the beginning of the month, we already started the second year of this program. The government in 2022 has chosen the direction of the support of the small and medium-sized companies in the framework of Є робота, and the separate direction we chose processing companies because they are creating at least 2.5 multiplicators in terms of creating jobs. One created job in processing industry, it multiplies 2.5 in the adjacent industries. Additionally, a lot of companies have really been affected negatively from the Russian aggression, and that's a very negative. And unfortunately, and one of the priorities was exactly processing, because recently the Ukrainian economy was so much raw material centered, so we have decided to choose the direction for better technological processing, or at least improved final product. This spectrum can be continued further because we have had question in terms of the problems with transportation of all our cargoes, because basically we are cut off from the sea. Therefore, the amount of transportation we need to decrease, and we need to transport cargo or iron ore in such huge volumes. We simply can't do that. The support is that the grants are provided for subjects of business activity who are running business in the processing industry. The grant is co-financed with the state up to 8 million hryvnia to one grant receiver within the related parties or related companies. The territory of Ukraine, which has not been influenced by the Russian aggression, then this grant is given with the condition of 50-50, 8 million from the state and 8 million is the grant receiver. Those territories which are affected, they have better conditions, it's 80-20. So up to 2 million from the grant receiver and 8 million from the state. The grant is provided not with live money, it is for the procurement of the equipment that will be used in the processing industry. The repairs, procurement of cars, some raw materials, turnover money, that's no, because exactly this is meant to stimulate procurement of the equipment, because this will stimulate our production. As already mentioned, the program is already 2 years old. Over this time, we have issued almost 700 grants for the amount of 3.4 billion hryvnia. And I believe for Ukraine, since the beginning of independence, especially in the martial law, this is really absolutely unprecedented. Therefore, the program is working this year. We are continuing to receive applications, and these regulations, these grants are regulated by the Resolution 739 of the Cabinet of Ministers from 2022. Additionally, there was a Decree 2109. You can get into more detail. The applications are submitted via DIA portal. Everything is electronic. We don't get them in paper format. Then the application comes to the authorized bank, goes through the check of the business reputation to meet the criteria which I mentioned in the resolution. Then the bank sends the draft conclusions to the Ministry of Economy, and we are making a decision about either granting this money or refusing. And in case there are any questions, thank you, Daria. I think the questions should be there, and actually we have quite a lot of questions in chat, especially because we have 4 interesting speakers who will be looking at the situation in various angles. So let us give the word to Mr. Andriy Gapon, the director of the Fund of Entrepreneurship. We have mentioned several times about 579. Let us start from this program. You have the latest statistics. You are monitoring on a weekly basis which changes and what are the changes that we talked about in the program itself. Do you see any changes in what volumes of financing are coming over and which companies are engaging funds under this program? First of all, thank you very much for invitation. Yes, I have looked up your slides, and some figures I don't agree, because you're taking the whole portfolio of the existing loans. But basically now we need to talk about the new loans issued since the beginning of this year. Because since the beginning of 2022, starting from February 22, and honestly speaking, even before, the program was, this was COVID, then started the active phase of the war. And the main task from the government of Ukraine was not some recovery or growth of the economy. First of all, it was necessary for us to preserve what we have. So the program was successfully finalizing this job, and now we have such a phase-out point, which should be complete until 2026, because exactly one of the basics for us to continue this program here in 25-26 is the support of our international donors, who see in those expenditures that are borne by the budget of Ukraine some huge fiscal risks. So with this objective, the Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Economy, all the initiatives that are being proposed to this program, they always say this through the prism of such a shortening of expenditures. I can tell you that the dynamics of the program really slowed down, especially when the limitations were introduced for the turnover capital, which was quite long ago as a benchmark for the International Monetary Fund. And from the interesting things, from the interesting research of 2024, for quite a good direction that worked really well, that we didn't touch today. This is the direction of the so-called subjects of entrepreneurial activity, which are in the zones of high military risks. Thanks to the portfolio guarantees, thanks to the activity of the state-owned banks, many loans, many beneficial loans were received since the beginning of this year in these territories, which points to the fact that, yes, this is the objective of the support of the deoccupied territories. It gradually is reached. Nobody has solved the question of the military risks. Unfortunately, until now, we are still waiting for that, and thank you to the National Bank that they keep remembering about that. And also, if we decide this objectively, problematics, then lending of these territories will still be even more attractive, and really we may really improve the pace of recovery for these territories. When it comes to our average check, it has not changed. It's 5 million hryvnia per company. So factually, any changes regarding the maximum size of the financing within the 579 program for the priority sectors, they are not significantly influencing, and therefore these increases that we have had recently for the processing, for the energy service, they really have not reached those results which were planned. I really hope that this is connected exactly with the fact mentioned by Ms. Kateryna. It's the question of demand and the sales markets. Unfortunately, we believe it's not there in those volumes which used to be before the war. But thanks to the fact that we have, in any case, this program, that it does exist. We can move via it any changes that for the time being are requested by our state. And Andriy Strashnyi mentioned about this, that now, for me especially, as the administrator of the loan portfolio in the size of some 300 billion hryvnia, I mean, currently we have 130, but overall period it was 300. I'm very much interested what is happening to entrepreneurs if we have these blackouts in winter and we don't have any alternative to our grids. This will be NPLs. The companies will not be able to operate, they will not be able to pay for loans, and we will get more NPLs. What is the government doing for that? The government is moving into the proper direction. It creates beneficial conditions for the energy-efficient solutions that can reach its main objective. It's about the energy independence of these companies. We started to do this. That is not bankable, because without the green tariff, it became not such a favorable step. But everybody came to the conclusion that this initiative should be connected with the energy independence, not in terms of some profits from electric energy. And I really hope that we have already published the changes. So we believe that residential cooperatives will join this independent move into independence that will help the population of Ukraine to live through this winter, which I believe is very much important. These are the ones who actually create this demand, which is so much important. It's exactly the same people who are working on these companies, and the deficit of workforce is also, you mentioned, as the key factor which limits the development of the economy of Ukraine. Thank you, Andriy. I wanted to mention that your fund is doing not only 579, but some other programs. Can you say very briefly what these programs are and which companies can get some financing? Yes, over the time since the beginning of the active war, we launched 14 programs of international assistance, which are basically, we have the whole portfolio is composed of 21 programs, almost all of them. As you already mentioned on your slides, they repeat the basic criteria which are placed there. So for us, it's important that it's going to be bankable. The subject of SME, that they would have, everything should be transparent and understandable, and that they should have sufficient financial and targeted use of the program. And from the main points, it's our partners from the government of Germany. We are getting, it's the second year we're continuing the program Add Energy to Your Business, which foresees the implementation of the energy efficient solutions. This program has really proved effective and so much demanded. We are trying to increase its budget because for the time being it's 7 million euro, which were disseminated through the banks and become the basis for the entrepreneurs' loans. But we have also launched some grant programs, and together with GIZ, and also subsidized loans, also together with GIZ. So all our programs do have this German color, but this was until 2024. So we are really improving this geography. And from the latest news is that we are launching a huge program in Kryvyi Rih and the district of Kryvyi Rih, which will foresee grants for microbusiness and subsidized loans for the SMEs. The start is planned for September, October this year. That we don't have the convention This is the job for the Verkhovna Rada to do this faster, but they have even given us some funds, and we're ready to launch that. Also, there are some big plans in terms of ERC 2024. This was announced that we will be developing both our own capacity, and we will also changing our mandate to make sure we could engage additional funds in other institutions which would be ready to invest in Ukraine during the war, to make sure you would support and rebuild. We have some preliminary agreements with JICA in terms of entering the Ukrainian market for the SME business, because now JICA implements its programs mostly for big projects, and for SME business, these projects are not yet there yet. The Japanese government has significantly helped Ukraine in the beginning of this year when there was a deficit, significant deficit of cash flow. They really helped, and this assistance was so much timely. And we hope that JICA will also become another partner to implement programs for SMEs. And what's important, last sentence, what's important, we changed slightly the view of the world of our IFIs working with Ukraine in terms of the combination of various financial instruments for the support of the small and medium-sized business. And that's why Mr. Andriy and Ms. Daria explained about these two programs. One of them is grant, and one is our 579. But for the time being, they can be combined. It's exactly about other programs as well, which are coming over to Ukraine within Ukrainian facility, EBRD, and the rest, all of these resources that are received by the banks, they can be combined together with 579, and we have really a good beneficial product, which is the biggest possible in these conditions for entrepreneurs. So if before international partners were against overlapping of help, now they believe that this overall picture of the market, they not have only allowed us, in fact, they are stimulating us to bring things together and to come up with products that will be even more beneficial for our business, which is very important. Thank you, Andriy. You mentioned that there is this possibility and things and the loans are available for big business and for SMEs. And when we talk about the possibilities of big business, that's where I would want to ask to join Artem Shevalev, the EBRD bank. Artem, please, we see that the companies are engaging investment from EBRD. These are the volumes, which is very difficult to do this within the framework of the banking system of Ukraine. What are the current ways? What are the instruments? What should be the movement to get the financing? Thank you, Vladimir, and many thanks for invitation. First of all, I would like to say some small important things. EBRD is financing biggest companies and the biggest loans, but at the same time financing of small and medium-sized business. It's one of the priorities, but this is done through agent banks, and EBRD has several credit lines which also specifically are formed for the current situation, and we can talk about that a little bit later. When it comes to some big clients, big loans, yes, EBRD is trying to quite actively use their capacity in Ukraine. And in the end of last year, the decision was approved in terms of the increase of the capital of EBRD to help support the bigger pace of Ukraine projects, taking into account the reality. Still, I mean, EBRD is the regional development bank, so this financial muscles is much less compared to the World Bank. But in any case, we're talking that even under the conditions of the war, we will try to finance projects for 1.5–2 billion euro per year. Since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, the focus has been, it's exactly what we have already said, which is less. Actually, it's what we call the emergency liquidity. It's exactly to support businesses when there are some significant cash flow gaps in 22-23, to make sure that our clients could simply pay back in terms of their salary projects and with their suppliers. It was also quite natural that we have seen the biggest consumers of this support were the companies of the state sector of the economy. These are our biggest state-owned companies. In the first place, Ukrenergo, Ukrzaliznytsia, Naftogaz, for obvious reasons, because the needs of 22-2023, they were in the first place to provide the stability of the basic sectors in terms of transportation and energy provision. Now we are talking about the fact that it's important to grow the investment into the real sector of the economy, into the processing businesses, and of course, this has to be a private part of the economy. At the same time, if we talk more about problems that show up, first of all, let us be honest. This is the limitation of the appetite. It's what Kateryna mentioned. With all patriotism of our business, the war, it's a huge uncertainty. So we see that big companies, in reality, they are quite limited, have quite limited appetite for the capexes. From those who really have the requests that are already formulated, it's the agricultural sector, it's our agricultural companies or processors. In this direction, yes, really, we have certain changes, and we're talking about some big private clients in the private sector. When it comes to some important things, okay, we have heard what was in the Italian conference about the biggest since the beginning of the war M&A transaction, that the French arrival that invests in LifeCell and Data Group and creation of integrated telecommunication structure on the basis of these two companies. It could seem that, yeah, just a general transaction in the private sector, what should we talk about? But we talk about quite a significant investment during martial law. And although a certain opinion could be that this is the transaction between two international shareholders, especially in the context of LifeCell, but we are saying that the French in this transaction, they announced about their intention to invest in Ukraine. This will be the investment into the assets that are in the production. That's all about the improving the connection and increasing coverage. Why I'm talking about this transaction in the context of EBRD? Because EBRD, like everybody, they are the creditors that are supporting this entrance of the French investor into Ukraine. We are seeing our big players who would also be getting the support from EBRD, such as Nova Poshta or Naftogaz in various sectors, logistics or the energy sector, and that is really the clients from EBRD. And in order to expand that, and definitely EBRD is interested in expanding the circle of clients. But here we are turning into a very old and not a very good story. It's exactly the limitations about this bankable. And Some companies are already working with EBRD and international IFIs. These are well-known clients, and possibly they have further limitations in terms of further lending. All this could be the companies that belong to some big industrial groups. Unfortunately, we see that they find common ground. So far, that the war would change the appetites of internationals in terms of financing clients from this sector. But I also believe that this is the issue for a separate conversation. And the third category, let's put it this way, it's smaller businesses or bigger business that grew not so long ago, and they didn't grow into the corporate sector. These are the business who are financially have some problems with the structure of ownership or in transparency, and it's without any comments. This is something that where the client has to understand that they have these drawbacks, and they need to, if they want to go up to the new quality level, they need to regulate these things, irrespective of the fact whether it's a war or not a war. That's like what it is. Thank you, Artem. And let us look at this situation. Also, from another point of view, we have Viktoriia Kulykova, the chief of the Department of the Business Association Committees, and in our research of the Center of Economic Strategy in terms of the access to financing, we will add the results of a lot of surveys of the business, and very often they're very different. I wanted to ask you how you evaluate that, how significant problem is this, what obstacles are there for the business, and how you as association, how you can influence the improvement of access to financing. Welcome, colleagues. I'm without electricity. In case the internet is away, don't be surprised. But hopefully I will be able to have my say. Yes, EBA is permanently doing research. We're surveying our members. What is the mood? What are the plans? The problem to financing is mentioned by everybody. And they also emphasize in the communication with international partners and with our state authorities. The current situation, it's quite complicated for the company. Regarding the results of the survey, the companies that are planning to engage funds in 2024, they are more or less planning to engage own funds. 75% of the surveyed companies, they are not ready to take loans in Ukrainian banks, and the reasons are that the rates are too high as far as they're concerned, and the banks are not flexible enough. When it comes to cooperation with international financial institutions, they give certain insurance programs and some other investments, but it's quite a difficult due diligence and compliance procedures, and everything is quite bureaucratic. And in order to apply there and to get financing, this is possible for really big, powerful players, and we have mentioned them today. The majority of the companies that we have surveyed, they even said that they have not even tried to submit applications to any programs because some simply doesn't believe that it's possible. Some say that it's a very complicated procedure and they would find some other ways for themselves. So with these questions and with these perceptions, it's important to also work. It's important for the banking sector to convince them and to be a little bit more flexible to somehow bring this information that there are some programs and there are some possibilities for some cheaper financing, Yes, they are there, but maybe not everybody have heard about them. So we see our role as the European Business Association. We are permanently running roundtables, meetings to make sure that various stakeholders would hear each other. Just last Friday, we had a roundtable about the key issues of recovery of Ukraine. We have invited representatives of the Ministry of Economics, our ECHO, from various industries, from various sectors, from various parts of Ukraine, including most affected, to have really a good dialogue. Especially when it was important when the representatives of the state authorities would talk about accessible programs, what they're doing. ECHA explained that the banks probably doesn't want to insure military risks in Kharkiv. So there was one speaker from Kharkiv, and they said that nobody wants to insure from anything in Kharkiv because it's very high risks. And the deputy head of ECHO, she said that there are some new programs of financing from Ukraine facility that we will be getting, that they're planning also to use exactly to cover the military risks in such regions where it's more risky. Also, we had on these roundtables, we had representatives of insurance companies and banks, and they explained to the representatives of other businesses about those programs and affordable possibilities for financing what they have. They maybe reform their services, but to make sure this dialogue would take place, because very often it's the deficit of information, deficit of understanding. We even didn't try because this is, in our opinion, is quite difficult, because we know that loans are always very expensive. We as ABA, we permanently have meetings with international partners in the framework of our territorial unit, Global Business for Ukraine, and the Recovery Committee. We were meeting with the Polish bank, BGK, which is also one of the fundamental banks that will get access to Pillar 2 financing and will be able to further partner up with Ukrainian banks and to give certain loans to them. So in the framework of such meetings, we are not only getting information, but we also, for that Polish bank, we have given feedback from the business, from the various industries, what are the priorities, what business needs, which other options are there, loans, financing, insurance, what's most important. So we would have this full exchange of information. Definitely, we are working very actively as each association with various authorities to resolve various key issues, problems, including the access to finances, foreign currency liberalization, and the Regulations Committee is very actively cooperating with the National Bank. Many thanks to Ms. Kateryna and the whole National Bank for the active dialogue, for the permanent meetings. We also had surveys about the needs of business in the foreign currency liberalizations, what to liberalize in the first place, payment of dividends or loans. So the needs are many, and to cover them all at once, the National Bank can't. We understand that the hryvnia should not fly somewhere. It's important for us to preserve the macroeconomic stability and the predictability of the FX rate. And exactly for National Bank, it's very important the results of our research, and they said much from what we proposed and asked, they used in that in the biggest wave of liberalization of FX limitations, and we were mega thankful to them. And I've received the mailing that the colleagues of the committee are launching another wave of service, what else is necessary. So we will be definitely sharing this with you, and this constructive dialogue will continue. It's clear that we have the dialogue and we are cooperating with a lot of other international bodies. Also with ECHO, we have helped from the side of the business. We have provided proposals, remarks regarding those insurance products that they launched recently. ECHO can now insure not only the experts' investments, but also not only experts, but also investments within the country. So we gave them some technical consultations to make sure we would have a good product. We would need professionals from various sectors, and once they're exchanging opinions and give their opinion, as a result, we get the product that the business can use, and the state authorities are proposing this. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation, and thank you for your research of the survey that will make our discussion understandable. The question is whether the business wants to engage funds for the development. 80% of the business say yes, but only every eighth business comes to banks to engage the money, because most of them invest own funds or engage the shareholder capital. So we'll come back to the questions. We are behind time today because we have some interesting questions. We need to give them some basic attention. But you have the possibility to ask a question. I would like to remind you that we have Boris Shestopalov, the co-founder of HD Group. Boris, welcome. From what has been said by colleagues from the state authorities, from the business association, I wanted to hear, was that fit to your experience to financing? What are your main reasons and refusals? What kind of limitations you feel that interfere with your possibility to work? Many thanks. You know, we have this double feeling from what I'm saying, because if it's not, this is not true, then it's like that. We have quite a large number of instruments for financing, but really it has this directedness to a certain size of business, because we, after we have lost, about our company, we are engaging funds, first of all, in those banks where we have been working before the war, and we're trying to cooperate a lot with IFIs, with USAID. We have some positive experience of engaging quite sensitive grants for the production of new companies, because exactly we have a big request for investments. First of all, because we have lost during the war 5 companies, and from the big business we have really become this medium-sized business. From the point of view of our reporting, from the point of view of our previous size, we don't have too many instruments. I already mentioned about definitely we don't have the accessible the state grants. We are very much thankful. We have used the program of 579 in full volume for the agrarian companies, but still have some 10 companies in the company who are working from Chernivtsi to Kryvyi Rih. For us, this amount, we absolutely quickly used it up, and the balance will be used now to 1 cogeneration unit, although we do require 6. And definitely now we don't really rely on Ukrainian financing. We are now searching for international financing, talking to embassies, searching for financing directly from the producers, and a lot of other instruments. As I already say, we have such issues, and definitely I have seen a very clever table that explains which conditions should be met by business as a must to get financing, first of all, from Ukraine. But there is a very sensitive issue related to collaterals. Collaterals is very sensitive for us, -5 factories which are on the balance of the company, with the credit load on these companies where we continue to serve them. Certainly we have certain problems with collaterals, knowing that we really have invested a lot during the war, and own capital and almost all profit of the company, but really for the recovery of companies, because we would need now, we want to recover 2 destroyed companies in Berislav and Orekhov, but in other territories we have part of the equipment, we have people, definitely technologies and competences, and for this we need to bring them out. We want to bring one company to Kryvyi Rih, where we have a huge site and which is working, and the other one to Vinnytsia, where we have started during the war, the specialized industrial park, which was from our opinion, this will be specialized in agricultural processing companies. Definitely all of our directions now, where they have this element of experts. Expert for us in our company, it's most important question. And we, first of all, we are growing experts, but definitely for the development of new products, high margin products, it's important to engage investments for the purchase of investments. That's where we're entering another circle. And for instance, now in that part of the Kiev Oblast that was deoccupied in April 2022, we are now recovering another company. We are almost reconstructing the new company, which is doing exports, orders, and international grant organizations such as WFP, United Nations, and others. We have engaged a huge grant from USAID. We continue our cooperation with USAID. So today I have more expectations about financing from international organizations rather than the Ukrainian banking sector. We understand that they have over liquidity with funds, but as I said, we talked a lot with the National Bank. From this point of view, we understand that we have such limitations that are there, and even the healthy business, but still which has huge losses, it becomes unhealthy in the very same moment. So we immediately have the violation of covenants, we have the indicators falling down, and all of that looks in such a way that it's like, in our case, this is something that we would move to the international reporting because we have decided that we should be bankable. And for 4 years, we're doing international financial reporting, we're making international audit, we have formed a group, we have submitted the beneficiaries, we have done everything from our side, because in case the medium business, I apologize, the medium business can get financing throughout 1 week, 2 weeks, we even having everything that is important. Once again, I would like to emphasize the competency, the 20-year experience of the company, the experts, revenues, good indicators for experts. The majority of the Ukrainian programs are still closed for us for the reasons that I have mentioned. I understand that definitely that thanks to the very significant covenants, the banking system has a good resilience. It did survive, and it's good that we have the possibility of the green finances. But I only want to say that I understand that big companies, for certain reasons, I mean, even certain groups, they don't have access to financing from the bankable reasons. The majority of the programs which are meant in Ukraine, they targeted to the small business, while the medium-sized business, which is not too many in the business, we're talking from 1 to 3 billion hryvnia. This medium-sized business, it's like in a certain niche when we are not that big, but we are not small at all in order to count on the support programs. But again, if we talk about that, this is the combination of 15 smaller companies. 5 of them were lost. Nevertheless, the company was able to find possibilities to continue existence. Our other problem, which is quite, I mean, not the problem, it's our choice, but 50% of the companies And I'm not the only one into this, what we call the frontline territory. We are in Zaporizhia, we're working there, we are investing, we are putting solar, we are buying all the energy. What it is the yellow zone. We don't even believe this. That's quite an interesting story. We are not even considered the frontline territory. We don't have any. They say, what kind of frontline territory you have? When we don't have fights in the, yes, 30 kilometers from Zaporizhia, they do, but inside Zaporizhia, not yet. So we're working conditionally in the normal conditions from the point of view of the existing legislation, but from the other side, we are absolutely yellow or the red zone, and I urge you that 90% of the Ukrainian banks are not even looking at financing of our companies and territories. They're not even considering that. We're here to engage money in Zaporizhia. We are trying to secure assets, make our collateral out of our assets to re-forward the money to Zaporizhia and renting it to the Zaporizhia company. That's how things are, because really, we are not the only one like this. I'm talking about companies who are the so-called 50-kilometer belt. And today, I believe that part of our business exists, in other words, not because, but against. Yes, we have such a story. We are continuing to work with a huge share of optimism because this is our basic capital that should allow us to exist. Or to make new projects without any other approach. Because we can't really make it only with the profits of the shareholder. Thank you for making this possible. Thank you for confirming our request that the problem of collateral is quite critical, and for mentioning these zones, some with bigger companies which are average business. And now we will get a quick goal. I believe that we can take another 20 seconds, and I suggest so the first question, Baritork, is asking whether there will be international investors giving financing and whether we expect that this lending international will give it its role. Definitely later, yes. And for this, to stabilize this and to renew export logistics, because the foreign currency risks nobody wants to take on, neither the banks nor the clients. So it's a question of gradual recovery, and I'm sure it will recover. Thank you, Kateryna. So we're expecting, but okay, in the further perspective, Nadia is asking on which sites we should search for these actual proposals. There are several sites that was developed within DIA business. There is the grant market, also agri-analytics, and this is not the exclusive list. There are some other aggregators, and some of the aggregators are meant for the IT sector, which we didn't touch because it's a separate sphere, and there are separate proposals in terms of engaging financing. These are the questions that were in the Q&A and the questions in general chat. This was the research in the Center of Economic Strategy. The colleagues shared the links. The question whether there is an alternative of engaging debt financing or engaging shareholder capital. Yes, the need is increasing. In case we have high rates for lending, then people are searching for the shareholder capital with its pluses and minuses, where we have the possibility to engage lending. There is this wish that it's gradually decreasing. In case the colleagues, the participants of the colleagues have some additional opinion from that, I would be very happy. Artem, please. I can briefly tell you. First of all, the science tells us that the shareholder capital is the most expensive type of capital, because if there is a possibility to engage credit funds, I would recommend to do that. In terms of the expenses of the hryvnia resource, it's yes and it's yes and no at the same time. EBRD is forced to compete, almost doesn't compete with the Ukrainian banks in terms of the rates. Okay, maybe EBRD has longer money and bigger volumes, but also there are Ukrainian banks. It was mentioned already by Boris. There is the wish to give lending, not so easy, but in principle, these are the Ukrainian banks. That's a high-quality source for financing. Therefore, I would really look at that very attentively. The instruments, what they're called blend finance, when we are mixing grant resources and the credit funds, that's in reality could be a good solution that will give a cheaper resource. So the banks and the government and international organizations are working on that blended financing. Thank you, Artem. We are also asked what is the investment gap and how you see the role of the export credit agencies in the support of small and medium-sized companies. The Minister of Economy can reply to that. Colleagues, my specialization is not a credit agency. We have the focus of the export credit agency on, we don't have on small and medium business because its main objective is to support exporters. So we have to make either a more detailed request. Please write to us, we will reply. In reality, once again, the theory, as Artem says that ECA is created and functioning in those sectors of economy or those subsectors where the market mechanisms are not working. So from the point of view of the development of the Ukrainian export, especially taking into account the fact that we have a significant reorientation of the export and imports. Today, the Export and Import Agency has received additional conceptual assignments because we are opening up countries with whom we have not cooperated before, neither from the export nor from the import point of view. So from that understanding, the potential is absolutely here, but taking into account once again the capitalization of our ECA, this potential will be fully uncovered with the cooperation with the export credit agencies of the partner countries. And this can be strengthened with some international agreements. Because once again, I'm talking about this recovery for the prospects of increasing these volumes, but the prospects are there and the role is quite serious. Thank you, Kateryna. Also, there is a small question from the business. What is the prospects of financing technological operations if the company is doing fresh berries, fruits and vegetables that require cooling down? What does it mean? Meaning, are there any energy risks in case there are operators or programs that are ready to finance these types of business? Please, could you explain? I can tell you very quickly. Let them look at the package. First of all, the energy package that was approved by the government, because such business without the independent generation you understand, in case the business can't take on these risks, the bank for sure will not do that. So please look at the package which is proposed by the government these days, and in case the volume of financing are beyond 150 million hryvnia, look at the memorandum that was signed by the bank, because the 19 biggest banks have signed the memorandum to support energy infrastructure, where the loans are mentioned and the volumes for the small and medium business and frameworks and timelines, and even the rate is 13.5% annual in local currency. So please get to know that, and I think you will find many answers in there. And two more questions in the energy sector. First of all, can the market digest the amount of investment into the energy security? And the second question is from Maxim and Tamara, where we can get a grant for the production of the solar station in Chernivtsi region with 1 megawatt capacity. Let me say, the market can digest it, both financial and non-financial. More than that, we have 8 or 9 megawatt that were damaged or destroyed. We have until the beginning of the season the job to recover at least one. There is equipment, there is enough of it elsewhere in the world, and the possibility of the banks to finance independently, or in case it's a small project, using the programs of state support, this is also possible. So this is not an issue. The issue is more about clients of the business. Now, to talk about that, as Boris has mentioned, there will be excused from VAT and excise tax, the equipment for energy. We have simplified the permission procedures to connect to the grid. So to a great extent, it seems to me the government has done a great job, and the banks have signed up that they're ready to finance that. So if we believe that 1 megawatt, it's like $1 billion, and we would need to renew at least 1 megawatt, then the financial resource is more than sufficient. So the second question I would like to ask my colleague. The second part of the question is mostly to you, about grants. If possible, we have, as far as I remember, we don't have grants for such a capacity. We have grants for some residential cooperatives. It's the greenhouse program. As far as I'm informed, we have some loans with zero rate for physical persons with limited access for the production of solar stations. We have 579 program with the beneficial conditions for the generation for the small and medium-sized business. And as Kateryna mentioned, it's also own programs of the bank with guarantees of MFO for 13.5% with some attractive conditions. I think we can choose something from this list. I would also like to add, look, we have changed the approaches. We have softened approaches to calculating collateral. Today, the banks in the memorandum said that the equipment that is being brought in, it can be the collateral. We improved the coefficients, so this really simplifies the approach, and we have really outnumbered all the possible ways, so please do come to us. Thank you very much, Kateryna, Boris, Artem, and we will be finishing. I would like to quickly ask Ms. Kateryna, she has already replied to this question, 0.7509, this is the coefficient that is recommended by the National Bank for the collateral. Yeah, okay, good. Thank you, Artem. That's already approved. It's already in progress. The banks have it. Go to them. Artem, please. Very briefly, thank you. It's also very important information as the member of the supervisory board of Privatbank that we can do more in terms of generation. The generation looks now that it seems like it's too many, but quite a lot of grant funds, international grant funds, which are floating around generation financing. But when you look at this in more detail, there are issues. In reality, there are not that many highly prepared, with high quality prepared documents. And even suppliers of equipment say, yeah, it's available, it's on the warehouse. But when you try to look it up, and not is so rosy as they look about it. So most importantly is to have the high quality project, but to find financing for it. Okay, so we have gone beyond the time. At this, I would like to thank to our panelists for the participation, our viewers who have looked at and who have watched us until the end. And I would like to mention that this meeting is organized by the Center of Economic Strategy together with the German economic team, and is a regular overview to the economy with the special topic, what keeps the business from engaging funds. Very happy that we found some common points and some problem points. Of course, we are more interested in problem issues. We will be looking at them and we will see where they can be matched and to get better synergy of the business and the authorities. Many thanks for the participation and see you next time.